EG, welcome to the Human Protocol podcast.
Thanks, Simona. Great to be here with you.
Good to have you here. So, as obviously we were chatting, the main goal and story behind this podcast is I want to know about the humans behind the big things that get built in this ecosystem, behind the ups and the downs. I want to know what that was like for you as a human being, the ups and the downs and the arcs, because I think it's very, very important that we don't lose sight of the humans and actually their experience throughout it all and the personal side of the big things that we built.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right. So, first off, tell us who you were before entering this world. I want to know about the game. I want to know about the reliability engineering side, who you were and how you came in to the fold, let's say.
Sure. Yeah. So, majored in computer science, was working in LA for a couple of different startups in the area. Always doing back-end engineering, infrastructure, and I got the bulk of my experience at a company called Gaikai, which was doing video game streaming. And they were doing this really bleeding edge stuff. This was around like 2009, 2010, where they were running games in a data center, capturing audio and video, streaming it to a thin client, letting people play games on their mobile phone that otherwise at the time, the phones weren't powerful enough to actually run.
Yeah.
So that was like an eye-opening experience. It felt like I was learning so much every single day. All of the people that I was working with were super talented engineers and learned a lot early on in my career there. So stayed there for about 4 or 5 years, went to another startup also in the LA area that was doing like back-end hotel software. So that whole skip the front desk, you have a QR code to check in, and that's your key that you use to get into the hotel. Like nobody was doing it at the time, and that was the technology that they were building. And so that company ended up getting acquired as well after I left. But the main thing there is I met my co-founder, one of them from Infura, Maurice.
Okay.
And he's the one that got me down the crypto Ethereum rabbit hole.
Okay. How did he do that? What did he tell you? And then what out of what Maurice said, you were like, oh,
yeah,
this is cool. This is interesting. I went in.
I always loved going out to lunch with coworkers back when we actually used to go into work.
Yes.
Right? And Maurice and I would go out to lunch and we'd talk about different ideas and say, we should do a startup at some point. Like, what should we do? And at the time, it was AR and VR or AI ML. And do you want to do something in these spaces? I'm like, no, that's not really something that's really like speaking to me right now. What else?
Yes.
And he said, well, have you been following this Ethereum thing that's been launching? It was probably early 2015 when he mentioned it to me, late 2014, something around there. And he said, if you've been following Bitcoin, it's basically like that, but better. Think like programmable world computer. So like that was the thing that he mentioned to me. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting.
Yes.
And he's like, well, I met one of the co-founders, Joe Lubin, at this conference, and I think you should really talk to him. He's doing this company called Consensus that is really, really trying to build up Ethereum, and anything like that helps Ethereum like progress forward. You should have a call with him. So he set up that call, and that's when I met Joe.
Okay. And then from there, how fast did Infura kind of come to be?
Pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah,
I feel most of the things that around that time with Consensus were like, cool.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It was like, I remember it was like a weekend call. I had like 2 young kids at the time. It was like a newborn and like a 2-year-old or something.
Okay.
And, I had to take the call on like a Sunday afternoon. Met Joe. He was sitting in the Brooklyn office. And, you saw people from like Uport over there in like one corner and all of these other like early projects.
Yes.
And he told me about what Consensus was doing, and Maurice was already doing some work for Consensus. And
Okay.
he gave me the pitch of, yeah, so, you build a project within Consensus and you have ownership in that. It's kind of like an incubator,
Mm-hmm.
accelerator type, or not accelerator, incubator type model.
Yeah.
And just build something that helps Ethereum. Like you
Okay.
figure that out.
Okay.
And like just talk to people, find out what you want to do. And
Yes.
I'm like, okay, that sounds interesting. He's like,
Yeah.
great. So you just need to give like 2 weeks and get started. I'm like, well, I sort of have like, I'm not one of these other people that's like fresh out of school and
Yeah.
can take that kind of risk. I have like a wife and a
Yes.
family, and um, let me figure this out. Maybe I can kind of do this as like a contract and
Okay.
figure it out. He's like, yeah, that works.
Okay.
He pretty much seemed open to anything.
Yes.
And so I said I would start doing that, and then he started setting up some calls, and I met um Aaron from MetaMask, and Dan, and some people from Uport, and some
Yeah.
people from Ujo, some of the other early spokes that were starting to build already at the time, and started to try to figure out what we were going to build.
Okay. So was that exciting for you? Was that moment super exciting? Because realistically, you had carte blanche, right? Figure out what you want. The door is open and come in
Yeah.
once you figured it out.
Yeah, it was exciting. But like, honestly, I didn't go into it thinking, great, we're going to build this startup and Ethereum's going to be super successful. Like, I was a bit like pragmatic. I'm like, okay, great. This is something where I have a day job. This allows me to kind of like explore like
Right.
doing my own thing.
Yes.
And I'm even getting like paid a little like on the side,
Yeah.
like which helps with young kids and trying
Yes.
to
Yeah.
buy a house in LA and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, it just kind of felt, it didn't feel like a huge milestone. It felt
Okay.
like okay, this is a cool thing that I'm also now doing.
Okay. Okay. And then how long before, and what was the process before you kind of fully took the step in
Uh,
and quit your old job, et cetera, et cetera?
It was probably about 6 months.
Okay.
So that was around May of 2015
Yeah.
that I took that call and said yes, and I would start doing it. I, within a couple of weeks, did my first trip to Brooklyn,
Yeah.
went into the
Bogart.
office. Yeah. Met Herman, who ended up being the first person that really came up with the Infura name and
Yes. Okay.
vision. And like that was part of the find a project to work on that sounds interesting.
Okay.
And once we all started working on that together, within 6 months, I knew I wanted to do it full time. And it
Yeah.
was really starting to like resonate of like, okay, there's something here that we should all focus on.
Okay.
Because at the time at Consensus, everybody kind of split time between different things. Like when you would record like your hours and stuff of like how you were spending your time,
Yes.
people would be like, well, I worked 20% on this and 20% on that. And I'm doing some like open source work with 20% of my time.
Yeah.
And very few people had like one project that they were
They
solely
would
focused
focus on
Yeah.
fully. Okay.
Yeah, we ended up, I think, being like the first team or one of the first teams at Consensus that just purely focused on like one thing to start, because the moment that we started to support MetaMask with
Yes.
their developer beta,
Yes.
there was like a production system that had to be maintained, and that was July. So it was like 2 months after I joined, we already had that.
Whoa.
So
Okay.
yeah, now that you make me think about the timeline, it did happen pretty fast.
Yeah.
We just didn't really realize how significant it was at the time. Like
Okay.
MetaMask was no different than any other project within Consensus at the time. It
Yes.
was just, okay, here are a couple of guys that are building something and we're going to start running back-end infrastructure for it.
Yeah.
And we didn't realize like how significant that like dependency
Yes.
or traffic would become over time.
What would you say from this moment in time where, to your point, you didn't realize how fundamental this would become?
Yeah.
How quick was the shift to, holy shit, this is now very, very important for a bunch of projects or all of them?
It took a while. I'd say it was probably a year and a half to 2 years
Yes.
before it really felt like that. And
Okay.
that thing that they say about like, do you recognize product market fit or, whatever they want to call it, like at the time that you have it? You really don't, because
Okay.
you start with nothing.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden you get your first user, and it's like, are they really like, what's the difference between somebody that becomes one of your like top 1% customers and users versus just somebody that tinkers on a weekend and then goes away?
Right.
They look the same initially, right?
Okay.
And like their
Interesting.
traffic looks the same, and like their project kind of takes off just like yours
Yes.
eventually takes off, and like you don't necessarily see it for what it is at the time, right? And
Okay.
so it was things like little signals here or there, like emails that we would get from people saying, oh, I'm building on Infura, we're doing this launch, or can you like scale up in preparation for this thing that we're doing? You start to get those kinds of emails.
Okay.
And people reaching out asking for help with things. And then you start going to conferences and people are saying, oh, I'm using Infura, it's great, I love it, can you guys also do this thing?
Okay.
And then you started to really see like how much people were actually discovering it and using it,
Yes.
and how much they were like depending on it. But it really also coincided with how much Ethereum was starting to be
Fair.
used. And it was hard to
Yes.
tell how much of that was Ethereum and
Or
like,
you,
or
yes.
us, and like how much of like our growth kind of mapped onto that same like magnitude, right?
Okay. When was it blatant? When did it start becoming, no, it is actually?
I would say it was around 20, like middle of 2017. So it was probably about a year after we
You
launched
started.
Infura.
Yes.
Yeah, that's when it was the whole like ICO craze. And
Yes.
that's when we started to see, we used to have like these notifications that would come into our Slack channel every time somebody registered. And I remember at one point there were like 200 new user registrations like every day. And
Whoa.
that's what I mean by you don't really like I had worked in tech, but I wasn't on that side of it. I was like back end, right?
Yes.
So I didn't really have a sense at the time for like how many new users should we have like registering. And we were a free service at the time.
Yes, you
Like
were.
we weren't trying to monetize initially because people were just tinkering with Ethereum. Like that was the whole thing with how we built Infura was we're going to make it really easy for somebody to build on Ethereum and try
Yes.
it out. Like we didn't go into it with a monetization plan. It was
Okay.
just, this is a problem. We're going to try to solve that problem. And it looks like it's helping people. So we're going to keep doing that. And
Okay.
then we'll figure out how to monetize in the future.
Okay.
And that was something that Joe and Consensus allowed us to do,
Yep.
was like be patient with that and not try to like monetize too quickly. And when we saw those like 150, 200 new users every day, it's like, okay, but it's because it's free. How many of these would be coming in
Pay
if
to
it's
pay.
paid? But
Yes.
in hindsight, doesn't matter if it was free. Getting 200 new users a day is great for
Yeah,
any
yeah,
new
yeah.
project, right?
And were you, so I know that you mentioned you were going to conferences and so on. Were you frontline to dealing with,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was tough trying to do
Yes.
it with like also a small team, because while Consensus was always a pretty big company
Yeah, you
at the
guys were
time,
lean.
yeah, at the time that I joined, Consensus was around like 90 people
Yep.
already, but there were four co-founders.
Yes.
One of them left pretty early, and it was three of us. And so for that first year, it was just the three of us just doing everything.
Yep.
Whether it was me or Maurice or Michael, one of us would go speak at a conference about what we're
Yes.
doing. Maurice and I were always the ones kind of like on call to respond if there was a new Ethereum node update that we had to deploy or fix some kind of backend bug or scalability problem. We were the ones that were responding to that
Yep.
for the first year. And even like Michael, while he wasn't like in the trenches, like doing like the coding engineering stuff, he had like some sysadmin like experience and would do his best to like chip in whenever he could. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of us wore whatever hats were necessary.
What was that like in terms of managing? Because you mentioned earlier, as opposed to maybe a lot of people who came into that early consensus and early Ethereum, you already had a family and, you know, wanting to make sure that that balance was there. Was that tough
It is.
when you're
It is.
doing
Yeah.
everything yourself?
It is. I mean, not just time, but also like the culture, right? Because
Yes.
like you come
Yes.
to like work conferences and like networking events and things like that, and it feels more like a rave and a party, and like you go whatever whatever city you're in, you're living like that life, trying to like meet people, understand
Yes.
like how they're building, and then you go home and you're dealing with like a newborn and changing diapers and stuff, and
Yes.
trying to like reconcile like the
Yeah.
juxtaposition between like those two lives. I used to say I felt like I lived a double life because like I would go to like some conference somewhere and it just felt like a different reality, because
Yes.
at the same time like Ethereum's taking off, all of these people are becoming super successful with like whatever it was. Maybe it was just their investments or the product that they were building. Then you go home and I'm like taking my kids out in the stroller and walking them to the
Yeah.
park, and then
Yeah.
while I'm at the park, like getting a notification saying like, oh, Ethereum just hit a new all-time high, and so like our servers are at like maxed out 100%. I'm like, okay, I've got to like run this stroller home, ask my wife to watch the kid, and so I could like get online and help Maurice because he's like his stuff's falling over.
Overwhelmed. Yes.
He had a newborn as well that was the same age,
Whoa.
right? So yeah, that was now that I think about it, really exhausting.
Really exhausting, huh?
Yeah.
And also, I think, to your point, just the fact that you're obviously Ethereum is growing and then the knock-on effect, then do you also start getting the this isn't working, this is not reliable, and so on, like the criticisms that come to you and the project whilst you're having to balance all of these things. What did that feel like?
That's sort of like always something that you deal with, managing like back end and infrastructure,
Okay.
is like they'll say, you know, like whether it's infrastructure or IT systems,
Yes.
people only complain when it's not working, right?
Yes.
Like it can work smoothly 99% of the time, and you only hear about that 1%.
Yep.
So you kind of have to have a thick skin with stuff like
Okay.
that. Like I'm not super active on, I've never been super active on crypto Twitter, even though I'm following it.
Yes.
And you would see stuff like that, like, oh, Infura's having this issue or that. And
Yes.
but you can't, you don't have time to get involved in it. You're just
Fair.
focused on like solving the problem.
Yes.
And oftentimes it was things that we could resolve fairly quickly, and it was
Okay.
just like one person in particular, or a couple of people that were being like overly vocal or something and making it seem like it was much bigger than it was. It was like, as far as infrastructure and like services go, like a pretty like standard occurrence of like sometimes there's an outage or sometimes there's this
Yes.
thing that happens.
Yeah.
The difference is like when your email goes out, like you can check it again later and you're fine, like, okay, I'll refresh it in a few minutes. When you're
Yes.
actually trying to trade and deal with like financial systems, like
It's
people, then people are angry because their money is affected, their investment is affected, like whatever they're doing, there's like some sort of financial impact.
yes.
So that was like a revelation of, oh, this is like a financial system. Like, because initially some people were just doing things like buy a pixel on like the Ethereum homepage.
Yes.
And if they can do that now, it's like, well, you could do it in like a few minutes.
It's
Like,
fine.
yeah,
Yeah.
like that's where like the significance started to hit us. Like, oh, people are like really affected by anything that happens right now. Like, you should really start thinking about this. Like, you're building a stock exchange, you're building a
Yes.
bank, you're building something that people need to always be on and always be reliable and like respond. And like we did, it was just um realizing that people were actually now using it like that, and it was delivering that value to them, was a, okay, now it's time to like scale up the team. And
Right.
that's when we made our requests for like, we need an increased budget for this, and this is
Yes.
our hiring plan and how we plan to scale. And
Okay.
yeah.
And was it around that same time that maybe you were thinking about monetizing? Was it around the same time that the conversation started?
We always thought about monetizing, we just didn't know how. Like,
Okay.
remember at the time, like everyone was
Yes.
trying to monetize through an ICO.
Yes.
So we're like, okay, are we supposed to do like an ICO? Well, that seems like one of the criticisms early on was, okay, well, why should I use Infura rather than run my own Ethereum node?
Right.
It's like, well, you could always run your own Ethereum node. Like, you use this if it's valuable to you.
Okay.
So, like, we're
Yeah.
not trying to even convince you it's valuable to you. So
Yeah.
it felt like if that was the way that we were getting people to use it, and then all of a sudden we said, and now we're doing an Infura ICO, it almost felt like a bait and switch kind of
Yes.
thing. And we weren't going to
Yes.
do that. So we said, well, if that's not our plan of monetizing, like, what are we going to do? If it's traditional SaaS, how should people pay for it? Is
Yes.
it like per node, per API request? And now it's pretty obvious the API request model is what we and others went with, but it wasn't clear at the time.
At the
Like, nobody
time.
was doing something like that.
Yeah.
So we knew we would do some sort of SaaS, but like once it got to the point where it made sense and didn't feel like we were there yet, we tried offering premium support
Yep.
to projects that were doing ICOs. We're like, hey, you know, you just launched this 50 million, 75 million, like whatever it is, like ICO. It'd be great if we could put like a plan together to help support you guys through that. And they're like,
Yes.
oh, well, not sure if we're willing to pay that. Like, that sounds like a lot of money. Right.
Okay.
So that kind of made us feel like, well, that ICO like connected you with like tens of thousands, if not more, like users through our system.
Yes.
It did seem to add value. I'm not sure how to explain that to you. And that's where we were more like tech people, not really thinking about like how to best monetize it on the product business side. And that's a skill that we learned over time, but we definitely did not have it at the time. Otherwise, we would have gotten those contracts from every single ICO that launched on Infura.
And that's an interesting thing, right? Because and I remember this at the very beginning with bounties, it was explaining, or not necessarily explaining to people, but in a way, for you guys in particular, being that invisible layer, and that you, like you say, when it works, people don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, oh, but why would I pay for it? It's just there.
Yeah.
And at the same time, did that ever feel strange, to your point, with everybody else kind of building, I would say, the buildings on top of the road? Was that weird for you guys to kind of navigate, maybe get more resources or anything like that? And to your point, getting people to pay for it because it's the unseen layer, yet fundamental layer.
Yeah. It did. It was really hard to come to understand how best position ourselves.
Mhm.
Like, are we infrastructure and nobody really like knows about it?
Yes.
Or are we like a product and that should be at the forefront, and like
Yes.
we monetize it in a different way?
Yeah.
Because like you can think about things like, you know, the App Store for
Yes.
Apple,
Yes.
and that's critical infrastructure for that iOS ecosystem.
Yeah.
And they don't charge you a significant amount of money to like
To use it.
Like,
Yes.
it's not like here's $1,000 per review of each app you put on the App Store or anything
Right.
like that.
Right.
They make their money in another way.
Yes.
Right. And it felt like anytime we tried to do something that was too like right in your face, like monetizing it, like any idea like I was talking about with
Mhm.
that, like support for the ICO, at least at the time, it didn't like work.
Yeah.
Or it didn't really seem like something that was like the right way to monetize.
Mhm.
And so we held off until we finally launched like the paid Infura
Yes.
product in 2019.
Yes.
So if you look at it, it was over 3 years is what it took us
From
to
start.
get
Yeah.
to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the journey from then on, what would you say was there ever a moment in this journey where you're like, I can't do this anymore. This is too this. Like, were there any intensely critical moments where you doubted the journey, or you were, the work-life balance was just off? Was there any moment like that? Or were you always kind of, because you had that balance, you were able to be a lot more grounded, let's say, than others?
I'm not sure if it was like a healthy balance. Like
Okay.
I tend to always work a lot, and I've always enjoyed it. And that's the thing I would tell the team is like, we're fortunate, or prior to AI,
Yeah.
those of us like working in tech,
Yes.
like are fortunate to have so many opportunities.
Yes.
out there, and like you should be able to find a project to work on that you're really passionate about
Mm-hmm.
where work doesn't feel like work. Like if
Right.
work feels like work, you're probably doing the wrong thing. And
Yep.
so Infura for a long time, like did not feel like work. It eventually got there. Things do get hard and
Yes.
difficult, but like that first like 3-4 years, it's like the hard work is still like just
So
fun
good.
and so
Yes.
rewarding because
Yes.
you do things like you are on an air. Like I remember I was going to a conference, I'm on an airplane and I look over and I see somebody like using Infura's dashboard to like log
Yes.
in and check their project. They were probably preparing for their demo or presentation. Like that's the kind of stuff where it's like seeing somebody like using your project in the wild, like that never gets old. That always motivates you. Hearing people like as you're walking by saying like, oh, well, hold on, like you should just use Infura for that, or like sign into Infura and like they have that thing that you need. Like that stuff's like really addicting. Like that's the
Yes.
stuff that keeps people building and like gets you excited. And when it gets hard, like there's like initially we started with like no competition. Like we were the only
Yep.
ones that
Yep.
were doing this. And then as more people come into the scene and they say, oh, well, if that project's valuable, I can be valuable too if I do the same thing or
Yep.
do this different twist on it.
Yes.
Like that gives you that pressure. Like the competitive pressure is good, but it's also tiring. It wears you down, right? If you don't really have, whether it's like the support system like at home to help
Yes.
you through that, the
Yeah.
support system like on your team
Yes.
and like within the company, like it makes it like more of a struggle. And how you weather that is part of like the maturation of any like product or company. Like that whole thing of getting to product market fit, but then also keeping it, right? Like
Okay.
staying relevant in a conversation in an industry that's like increasingly competitive and
Yes.
growing. Yeah.
Okay. What was a moment where, was there a moment, as you say, in the maturation of Infura where you're like, this is getting too much? And does that lead to you stepping away?
I never considered stepping away because, or never seriously considered stepping away because it, it's when it's the thing that you create, there's this like, uh attachment
Yeah.
that you have to it, right? You don't want to abandon it. You don't want to
Yes.
abandon like your team.
Yes.
Like you're leading a team and like also like
Did you
the
feel a great deal of responsibility?
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Like yeah, with like any outage, any incident, thinking like, oh, all of these projects are relying on us, all of these
Yes.
like customers like trust us
Yes.
to power their applications. And if they're losing users as a result of us having an outage or not delivering the value that we promised them, it's a lot of responsibility, right?
Yep.
And so, uh, yeah, that responsibility never wore me down. Like I would say at around like the DeFi summer phase, it
Yes.
felt like the Ethereum ecosystem had like matured to the point, or the Web3 ecosystem had matured to the point where it wasn't just Ethereum, and there were
Yes.
tons of things out there that we weren't doing. Like we were pretty late in supporting Polygon and
Okay.
some of like the new chains that were coming up at the time, like Arbitrum and Optimism, where people had
Okay.
been asking us to support it for a long time. And like the scale of Ethereum that we were supporting was so massive just because there were tens of millions of users using MetaMask alone that
Yes.
were relying on us. That
Okay.
that kind of like distracted us from doing anything that was like net new. So
Okay. So just you were focusing on
how
core.
yeah.
Is that because the team was limited or just because you had so much on your plate that these things were kind of secondary?
So one of the lessons I learned was not to y- even if you start with like no biases, you sort of
Yeah.
like get them over
Yeah.
time, right? Like with ours, it was Ethereum was the main thing we're focused on. And from 2016, 17, 18, a bunch of like new chains and
Yes.
projects would say, oh, okay, you're doing this for Ethereum, do it for us too. And that was like maybe we tried that like once or twice and it didn't work out.
Okay.
Like we would stand up the infrastructure and nothing would get used and we'd have to tear it down. And so it
Okay.
was a cost, an opportunity cost of our time and
Yeah. Yeah.
expenses doing that. So when Arbitrum or Optimism or Solana or somebody like that came to us and said, "Oh, we're launching this new chain." To that point about like, you don't know what customer is going to be like the next hot thing. You don't know like what offering is going to be the next hot
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
So like Solana is a big one, like where we said like, no, we're not, sounds cool, totally like this whole
No
thing that you have with
thanks.
like
Yeah.
vertical
Yeah.
scaling and it's written in Erlang, like sounds really cool, but like we're really focused on this Ethereum stuff right now and can't help support that launch. Big mistake with
Right.
like not doing that. Not even like the money, right? Like Infura made plenty of money just focusing on Ethereum. It's like there was a use case for, in that instance, like Solana and users where we could have provided value very early on to
Yes.
the ecosystem. And that's like a missed opportunity, right? Of like what we were doing, we had learned at that point, it was around 2018
Yep.
that we met with them. Uh, we could have like we had 2 years of learnings on running that infrastructure
Yes.
and they were just launching. Like
Yes.
we could have helped them not just launch, but actually push things forward, I'm sure, by like contributing some of our
Well,
like
learning's
production
expertise. Yeah.
expertise and
Yeah.
learnings like
Yeah.
pretty early on, right?
Yeah.
Like they've been successful without us, but
Yeah.
like I look at those kinds of things as the like that's what the pressure does. It makes it really difficult for you to assess things like in the moment because everything's just going and it doesn't slow down, right?
Right.
And then I was mentioning like DeFi summer and like the NFT craze, like around 2021, you start to
Yes.
feel like the things that people need aren't necessarily the things that you were building.
Okay.
Like we were starting to add tons of chains and like new network offerings, right? But it was still like lower level instant like access to like node infrastructure.
Okay.
And now people were starting to hit like bottlenecks at like another layer. Like, how can I query all of this NFT data? I need an
Right.
NFT like API to improve that. And we didn't have something at the time.
Okay.
Or it's getting really difficult to query like thousands of balances at a single time. You need to like do something to improve that. And while we were trying to improve things at like a low level,
Yes.
there were like higher level abstractions or product offerings where now we were starting to feel like we were behind.
Okay.
And as the Ethereum and like crypto ecosystem grew, now there's tons of funded
Yes.
projects that are building
Yes.
exactly that thing. So
Right.
like what's the choice that you make? Do you go up the stack? Do you go broad? Do you do like specialized products? And like that's where it starts to wear you down because it feels like a very high stakes period where you have a limited finite amount of resources and
Yes.
like how you best deploy that to maintain your lead or grow your current user base.
And also make the right choice.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Yeah.
it's on you
Yeah.
and your other two co-founders to be like, which one do we pick?
Yeah. Well, at that point, we were down to two co-founders. Maurice had left to focus on
Okay. So
a layer
we're
two solution he wanted to focus on.
2021?
2021, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So then two co-founders. What choice? Which one's the right choice, Michael?
Wait, sorry, which
No, just
one?
like no, but you two going.
Yeah. Well, at that point, it's not just up to the co-founders. Our team was probably over 40, 50
Yes.
people at the
Yes.
time. And it's like, okay, do 25 people work on this thing? Do we carve out
Okay.
like 5 people to focus on a new thing?
Okay.
Meanwhile, like the core product always feels understaffed. Like
Yes.
always feels like there's never enough people that we can throw at that
Yes.
problem because of just like the massive scale.
Yes.
Like there's always some improvement that we can add or tech debt that we can tackle. So
Okay.
how do you balance that?
Okay. And in terms of the decision to move on, we're fast forwarding now a few years. What did that feel like? What was the process of stepping away from your project and your co-creation of the past 10 years?
It's sort of an evolution of what we were talking about, that around like late 2022,
Yeah.
like I really realized that while Infura at one point was critical infrastructure, if we went down, it felt like Ethereum was down because so many projects couldn't connect to the
Yeah.
blockchain anymore, um, enough other options now existed.
Mm-hmm.
Things like our friends at Alchemy and QuickNode and all of these other projects that offered similar RPC
Yes.
products, that we weren't this like single point of failure for the ecosystem. Whereas at one point, maybe we were.
Yes.
And it's like, well, that kind of means like this was always like public blockchain data, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of felt like a commodity.
Okay.
And so I started building a protocol for that called DIN, the Decentralized Infrastructure Network, around like late 2022.
Okay.
And my intent was make it so that anybody can like run the same infrastructure that Infura does,
Yes.
to offer this like commoditized data, whether it's Ethereum or Solana or like anything out there,
Okay.
so that as people build real world asset trading systems and like reimagine the entire financial system on top of blockchain technology,
Yeah.
there isn't one, two, or three companies that are like underpinning that. Just like you can look at the cloud hyperscalers as kind of like the same thing. Like
Okay.
any tech that's out there, and Infura included, are built on top of Amazon, Azure, Google, like
Yes.
the big three hyperscalers,
Yeah.
right? And so it felt like one of the best things that we could do to transition like the legacy of Infura into like what's needed like current day was build a decentralized protocol for it, so that starting with RPC,
Yeah.
it can be something that's offered on a decentralized network,
Okay.
and then expand that out to other offerings that starts to look more like a decentralized API marketplace.
Okay.
So that was sort of a natural evolution for me. It felt like at one point it was that bait and switch. If we did something like try to launch a protocol on something that Infura had with its early users,
Yes.
but now it had like sufficient like critical mass or something where you could actually launch a protocol like that, and it
Yeah.
was actually in like the best interests of like the community, the
Yeah.
tech, and everything at the time. So
Was that important for you, to your point, the point that you just made here, for the good of the community and the
yeah,
ecosystem? Like, you have that, and again, coming back to the responsibility angle. And this is something that maybe sometimes there are co-founders that obviously of projects that we don't necessarily think of as valuable. They're more about extracting value, that they don't feel a sense of responsibility. But I think for, for a very good reason, there's a lot of the founders from those early days that are very much carry that responsibility of, we need to act for the good of the community and the good of the ecosystem.
yeah, I would say like there's a balance, right? Because I'm not saying everybody should solely do public goods and things, right?
Yes.
And there, like we had ownership in Infura, and Consensus had an ownership stake in Infura for
Yes.
incubating it, and we
Yes.
sold Infura to Consensus in 2019.
Right.
And so from that point forward, I was a Consensus employee with Consensus equity, like
Okay.
helping build like Consensus value, right? And
Yes.
so like I got rewarded in like the value for what we created with Infura. Like I and the team got rewarded for the value that we created. Like there's a difference between like getting value and like solely maximizing value for yourselves in like a
Right.
self-serving way, right? And
Right.
unfortunately in crypto we've seen a ton of that. Like
Exactly.
you see those like value extractors coming
Yes.
into it, of the how can I make this valuable for me?
Yes.
The benefit of like being early in Ethereum is you met a lot of people that went into it like focused on like the things that are about the Ethereum
Yes.
community and trying to make
Yes.
Ethereum
Yes.
successful, making Web3 successful.
And if
Yeah.
they also became successful
Yeah.
as a result of that, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And
Yes.
so like the value that Infura provided, we didn't look at it as how to make money. We genuinely were trying to solve a problem, and it created value. And
Yes.
you can look at like so many startup like founder talks of like solve a customer problem, like focus on like your user's problem. Turns out like it's true.
It's
Like
true.
that actually does build value. You just have to like trick yourself into not focusing on the money.
Yes.
Like as much pressure as you feel to focus on it, just keep focusing on the problem, because that translates into money in the future if it really is a problem and you're solving it in the right way.
What does that feel like after 10 years of, even though, like you say, you sold it in to consensus
in
in
19, yeah.
2019, but still, what does that feel like to kind of put that chapter?
It it felt good to not feel that pressure to
Okay.
just continually grow
Okay.
like the monetization of like Infura as a product. That
Okay.
what I told like consensus at the time was it's going to get more expensive to try to like defend this layer where you see so much like commoditization happening with this particular product,
Yes.
like focusing in on value, like as a company in other areas where it's like MetaMask being in the company consensus chose to focus on like the consumer side of like how to
Yes.
make that experience like best and like deliver value that way.
Okay.
In which case within Fura, it's transitioning to a point where you can keep adding new services here in like almost like the most like cost efficient, economical, resilient way, which is this like decentralized protocol. And so like that's what we were designing was by having a
Okay.
protocol, it means any new network that launches if somebody out there is running the infrastructure for that, this protocol gives them a way of like offering that to the existing
Yes.
customer base of Infura, and now consensus gets access to like 1, 5, 10 different networks without having to be the ones running the
Okay.
expensive infrastructure for
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the transition. It felt like a natural one of I'm still helping Infura grow, helping serve Infura's customers, but doing it with people outside of our team.
Okay.
Like it's now like a community of people running infrastructure for Infura.
Infura.
Yeah.
So it was comfortable. It was a comfortable transition.
Yeah, that part of it was where
Okay.
there
What was
it got to
uncomfortable?
what what became uncomfortable is like where we're at where we got to over the last year
Yes.
is like do we at that point decide we want to like continue on like launching like a token and doing like a whole
Yes.
like token based like protocol? Does that feel like the right fit for this? Or like what's the right way to take like this to like the next step?
Okay.
And part of that meant like there needed to be some like credible neutrality. And so leaving consensus is something that I'm finally doing in the next month or so.
Yeah.
And that is that's a big change for me, obviously being at one place for the last 10 years.
Yes.
Stepping out of that sort of like comfort zone of familiarity
Yeah.
and really honestly like security of working within like a place pretty consistently for
Yes.
10 years in
Yes.
crypto is
Yeah.
almost unheard of unless
It
you're at like a big
is.
exchange.
Yeah.
And uh and so that and then like what is the right product to build like going forward,
Okay.
because opportunity cost is like a big thing, like I mentioned in a couple
Yes.
of points in our talk, that there's so many primitives that now exist, like real world assets exist now because of some of the underlying scaling technologies that didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
And stable coins, like initially we only had DAI and
Yes.
Tether and like
Yes. Huh.
now we have so many different stable coins and better stablecoin infrastructure that enable like better user experiences and thus products that are now getting mainstream adoption.
Yeah.
When you look at agentic commerce and all of the things that are exciting with like AI development and agentic development and consumption, crypto, like I fully believe in the crypto rails are a great solution to that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And people that are building like towards that using crypto primitives now are doing the right thing with the technology. It's
Okay.
not like don't try to build another DeFi application if like you're just kind of like forking something out there that already exists.
Mm-hmm.
Like be more original. Like
Yes.
there's so many cool things that we can build with the underlying tech
Okay.
that's what I'm planning on doing with the team next is, yeah, building that product with the underlying infrastructure that can now scale with the technology or those primitives that I mentioned that now exist.
So it's an interesting, so it sounds like, yes, there's the closing of that chapter, but there's a lot of excitement about putting everything that you've learned and everything that you've experienced in this new world that does have the capacity that wasn't there in the past
Yeah.
to kind of continue. So you're like ready to go, ready. Your energy levels are not dimmed.
No,
No.
it's been a roller coaster, especially
Yes.
like the last 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
There's uh crypto's dead, crypto's not dead, DeFi's dead, DeFi's not dead.
It's
Like
like
there's
Schrodinger's cat.
yeah,
Is it? Isn't it?
a
Is it?
little
Isn't
bit.
it? Yes.
Yeah, I would say I don't know if everybody in crypto is feeling that. Like I think like AI having this like impact on all industries and like
Yes.
the huge like steps in like change and impact that it's having is making everybody reconsider like current products, what they're focusing on, how they
Yes.
prepare for the next
Yes.
6 months and 6 years, right?
Yeah.
And part of that starts with a bit of that like uh the I guess like more like not optimistic way of looking at
Yes.
it. And then you start to like rationalize it and then you prepare and you say, okay, now I understand this and now I know how to move forward with it. And then the optimism comes back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the optimism does come back.
Yeah.
And that's one of the learnings that you've had in these past few years.
Yeah. And that's where the does it ever get tired? You ever feel like quitting
Yes.
comes in is I guess like quitting never feels like an option. It just is like you just have to like reinvent yourself or the product or adjust your mentality and like keep trying to maintain um, not relevance, but competency and clarity of vision and like, okay, I understand like what we need to be doing going forward.
Okay. Okay. Question that I tend to always ask, is there anything that you've wanted to say publicly but never have? Or something that you've thought, but particularly because you said you're not really on crypto Twitter or anything like that, So you're
oh,
not like in the
I
morning
read
where
it.
we.
I just don't
Okay, so what would you
post.
express? Not necessarily as a tweet, but is there
Hmm.
anything that you have wanted to say in all of these years and then you just haven't?
Let's see. Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, like to everybody that's ever like built on Infura, like thank you sincerely for relying on us and trusting us to build out this product to help support whatever it was that you were building and growing. Like to that point earlier about notifications coming in of like new user registrations. You see
Yes.
people like Stanny from Aave, like with his like personal email, like signing up for an account and you don't know who that person is and what they're going to end
Yes.
up building, stuff like
Yes.
that. Right. And so whether or not they're people are still using Infura as like their main like product for something like that.
Yeah.
Just the fact that at one point we helped in their journey, like sincere thank you to everybody for that. And then the other thing is people tend to get really stuck on like the ideology around like Ethereum, like the whole like Ethereum mandate stuff that's
Yes.
happening right now.
Yes.
And I I I've always been on the side of like being a lot more like pragmatic with things. Like your
Okay.
idealism can like exist or not exist. And it's
Yes.
like almost like distinct from like how you choose to like run your business or like build a product. Like,
Mm-hmm.
granted, there are people that don't look at this as a business or a product, and
Right.
that's where that comes from, right?
Right.
But so many people don't have that luxury and need to pay their bills and so that they can actually contribute and be a part of this ecosystem. And so as you're building a business or looking at how to like provide value, there's so many things out there that that we've now built over 10 years in crypto that improve on existing systems can actually build better products and look at it more from that, like building better products to solve problems for people that actually exist and don't get too stuck on the evangelizing side of it is what I
Okay.
would say.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Love that. I like the fact that you're like you say, you're on Twitter, but you're like a
I'm on
lurker.
it. Yeah,
You're a
for sure.
lurker. Okay. And then one last thing, what is something that you, let's say a rule that you now apply or will apply, let's say, to the new product or just in your life that you have kind of gotten to in the past 10 years? Like EG of 10 years ago
Hmm.
did not have this. EG of 2026 absolutely does not, like, always follows this particular rule.
Yeah. You can, oh man, being nice was something I always like pride myself with. And
Yes.
that's, we gave Infura away for free for a long time. And
Yes.
like, because we were afraid of like the ramifications of like having people pay for it. Right.
Yes.
Turns out when we actually started to monetize it, people valued it and they're like, oh, good. Now I understand like what motivates you. Now I understand like this isn't something that is going to go away tomorrow because you don't monetize. Like that was like a form of like, we thought we were afraid of not being nice, giving it away for free. Right.
Okay.
So that's one thing is like, if there's like a reasonable rationale, like people are reasonable and they'll understand it. You don't need to be overly concerned about the impressions that you make on people.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, whenever you meet somebody like at this conference or anywhere, like you don't know what that relationship will bring,
Yes.
and go into everything with an open mind. Like you don't know if like that person is like your new best friend or like your next like top 1% customer. And I went into a lot of meetings because like I said, there's a lot of grifters honestly that like gravitate to ecosystem where there's a ton of money.
Yep.
And it's really hard to filter out like
Yes.
the signal from the
Yes.
noise. And so defaulting to noise, I regret,
Okay.
because you miss out on the great signal. And
Okay.
it's exhausting trying to filter, but it's worth it. And that's a lesson that I learned
Okay.
is, yeah,
Have an open
have
mind,
an open
but
mind.
be discerning.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. EG, thank you so much for
Thanks,
joining
Simona.
us. This is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah. Loved it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.